Okay, so welcome to another lecture on topology. In this lecture, what we'll see is we'll see a theorem which implies that R is uncountable. This theorem will use kind of arguments of topology, compactness, but will not use the decimal expansion of R which you normally use in real analysis to show R is uncountable. We'll look at what is limit point compactness and sequential compactness. We'll in fact even show that if a space is compact, then it is limit point compact, but not the other way around. Okay, um, and finally we'll look at the fact that the Lebesgue number lemma, that every open cover has a Lebesgue number. Whenever you look at a compact metric space, we will show that Lebesgue number lemma holds in a sequentially compact space as well. Okay, so yeah, of course, I should have said sequentially compact metric space. Okay, so let's go to the next page. Okay, so we are now on page 69 of your handouts. Okay, the first concept that we have here is of a isolated point in a topological space. Point is called an isolated point if singleton x naught is open. Here are some examples. All points in natural numbers with usual topology are isolated points for obvious reasons. When you can look at the line, the real line, and natural numbers of course sit in kind of a discrete manner. So there is 1, 2, and so with the usual topology, all these in fact it has discrete topology. Natural numbers with usual topology is actually discrete topology, and that means singleton 1 is open, singleton 2 is open. In fact, all points in natural numbers will be isolated points because that singleton point will be open. What about and that holds in any discrete topological space. That's the second example. In a discrete topological space, all points are isolated points. R with usual topology, the whole real line has no isolated points, because if you take a singleton point in R, it's not open. In fact, open sets in R, apart from empty set, all open sets contain an open interval, and the moment they contain an open interval, that is a basis element, they have to have infinitely, in fact uncountably many points. So countable finite singleton points in sets in R are not going to be open, so definitely it's not going to have any isolated points R with the usual topology. Okay, so that's the definition of isolated points. Now we have a result here, and that's the theorem I told you. With after having proved this result, immediately it will follow that R is uncountable. So what does this result say? Let X be a non-empty compact house of space. If X has no isolated points, then X is uncountable. No isolated points implies uncountable. R has no isolated points, and in fact, if you look at any closed interval in R, then that will be compact, it will be housed off, it will be non-empty, and then you will be able, from this theorem, you will be able to conclude that if you have any closed interval in R, it's going to be compact. It's going to be uncountable, and therefore if a closed interval in R is uncountable, then the whole of R also has to be uncountable. For those who do not remember the definition of countable, I can quickly recall it for you somewhere, maybe at the side. Yes. What is a countable set? A set is countable if it is in bijection. So a counter X is countable if it is in bijection with natural numbers. Okay. So if I can show that any function f if I can show that any function f from natural numbers to a set x, any function, any f from natural numbers to x is not onto. If I can show that any function f from natural numbers to x is not onto, then I can guarantee x cannot be countable, right? Because if it was countable, there would be a bijection, and bijection would be onto. But if I can show any function from natural numbers to x is not onto, then I'm done, and I can conclude that set x is not countable. So that's what we are going to do. We are going to take any function from natural numbers to the set, and we are going to show it is not onto. Okay, so that's the going to be our way of proof. So let's look at some more details of this. So given any open set U not empty and a point x, so that's the claim we are making. So what we are claiming is that if you take any non-empty set U, open set U in x, and a point outside, not outside, a point, another point x in x. Now that point x could be either inside U or outside U. That's why I drawn this picture. It won't matter whether it's inside or outside. This claim will still hold. So we are making a claim, and we are going to prove this claim. There exists a non-empty open set V contained in U such that x does not belong to V closure. So we are going to have this V. So let me at least take a fresh page, and I always prefer to prove this on fresh pages. So let me prove this claim. I think I won't write the claim again. So all we need to prove is that given a open set U and a point, there is a subset of U whose such that x does not belong to the closure of that particular set. So let me take a new page, and we are going to prove the claim. So we are going to do a proof of this claim, and for that I will pull in the picture 69, page 69. Yeah, this is the picture. No, not the picture. 66. Yes, this is the one. Yeah. Yeah, this should be good enough for us. So yeah, so I have this U which is open. My U is open, and I have a point x which is either in U or outside U. I need to find a V such that x does not belong to V closure, and V should be contained inside U. So how do I go about this? First of all, take a point y. So take y belonging to U, y not equal to x. Now x could be in U or x could be outside U. Either way, the reason why I can find another point apart from, even if x was inside U, I can find another point y, is because if this whole U had only one point, say x, then it would have been an isolated point, because then the whole open set has only one point, that point becomes isolated. The fact that there are no isolated points allows me to take another y inside U, because the open set U has to have at least 2 points. If it had only one point, that one point would be an isolated point. So this theorem says that the space X does not have isolated points. So because there are no isolated points, I can find a y other than x inside U. Okay, now we know it's Hausdorff. So since x is Hausdorff, there exists neighborhoods W1 of x, W2 of y such that W1 intersection W2 is empty. We know this Hausdorff property. So we have these two. Now if I look at the intersection of W2 with U and call that V, so take V equal to W2 intersection U, then it satisfies all my requirements. It's non-empty. All we have to do is that there exists a non-empty set. We want to show that there is a non-empty set inside U which such that X does not belong to its closure. So V is non-empty, clearly Y is there in V. V sits inside U, and X does not belong to V closure. Why? Because there is an open set W1 which contains X and does not intersect V. So the moment there is an open set, then X cannot belong to V closure, because what is the definition of V closure? A point is in V closure if every neighborhood of that point intersects V. Here is a neighborhood of this point X which does not intersect V. So clearly X does not belong to V closure. And all the other requirements are obviously satisfied. V is inside U and so on. So the claim gets immediately proved. So if you go back and see what was the claim, given a non-empty set U in X and a point X here, there exists a non-empty set V contained in U such that X does not belong to V closure. So very easily this claim has been proved. Okay, so the claim holds. Now we actually go to the main part of the proof. We have to show that the space is uncountable, and I told you how are we going to do this. We are going to actually take a function f from natural numbers to x and show that so let me we are going to show it's not on to natural numbers to this set x. So let me just indicate that this claim has been proved here. That's done. Now we actually come to the proof of the main part of the proof. So now let f from natural numbers to x be a function. I have to show this function is not onto. Okay, so I don't need that picture on top there. So in fact I can just get rid of this picture. I need another picture. So right now let me pull this picture in and I'll get rid of this picture. So yeah, I think we can as well as do this. Okay, so now let f be a function. F of n I will call xn. F of n, let me call it xn, so that it is a sequence. So there's going to be x1, x2 and so on. There are going to be these points. Now what we say is that given x1, given let me just change the color. Given x1 and open set x, instead of u I can take the whole of x. There exist open set v1 such that x1 does not belong to V1. Again, given, now you take V1, so given x2 is going to be there somewhere, and V1 open set V1 which we found, we can find another open set. There exists open set, and this is all by the claim we have just proved. Given a point and given an open set, you can find another open set V2 such that, oh by the way, this is closure here, x1 does not belong to V1 closure, and open set V2 such that x2 does not belong to V2 closure, and so on. And you can keep doing this. In general, you can find xn such that, or you can find open set Vn such that xn does not belong to Vn closure. Okay, now these V1, V2, Vn's, then V1 closure contains V2 closure contains, and so on. This is a nested sequence of closed sets, non-empty closed sets, nested open, and this is non-empty. I mean, the claim clearly said this is non-empty, so don't forget that, non-empty everywhere, all these are non-empty. So given this is a nested sequence of non-empty closed sets, and we have seen that in a compact metric space, in a compact topological space, if you have a nested sequence of non-empty closed sets, then their overall intersection is going to be non-empty. So that finite intersection property, and this clearly satisfies the finite intersection property. So we had seen this before when we looked at a sequence of closed sets having that finite intersection property. So because it's a nested sequence, it has that finite intersection property, and so its arbitrary intersection is going to be non-empty. So because the space is compact, I can conclude from here that this implies that the intersection n going from 1 to infinity, the overall intersection of Vn closure, this is going to be non-empty. And so let me just say there is a point in this, so there is a z which belongs to this set. Okay, I'll write here z belongs to this intersection n going from 1 to infinity Vn closure. So there is V1, inside that is V2, inside that V3, and so on, and they are closures, and when you take the overall intersection, there is going to be a point there. But so there is going to be a z right in all of them, and that point z cannot be any of the x1, x2, xn's, because xn does not belong to one of the Vn closure. So can z be any of these xn? If z was an xn, then z would not belong to Vn closure, but if it's not in Vn closure, it won't be in the overall intersection. So clearly this implies that z is not one of the xn's, and of course if it is not one of the xn's, then this function f from n to x cannot be onto, because here is a point z which is not in the image of this function. So therefore f is not onto, and if it's not onto, it cannot be bijective. So no function from natural numbers to x can be bijective, therefore your x is uncountable. So that completes the proof of this particular theorem. Okay, so that is that. Now, as I told you, the immediate conclusion from here, or the important conclusion that we will have, is that we can conclude that R is uncountable. How do we do that? In fact, we can show that every closed interval in R is uncountable, hence R is countable, and that's pretty straightforward, because the closed interval is non-empty, closed interval is compact. We know closed and bounded in R is compact, so this is compact. We've proved in an ordered set, in the ordered topology with least upper bound property, all closed intervals are compact. This is Hausdorff, because any subspace of a Hausdorff space is going to be Hausdorff. R is Hausdorff. It's a metric space. All metric spaces are Hausdorff. So AB is going to be Hausdorff. So there are various ways of seeing why the interval in R is going to be Hausdorff. And so it's Hausdorff, it's compact, and it does not have isolated points, because the moment you have an open set in this, it's either going to be of the form some CD or CD, or half open closed. All these are what is this? All these are going to have infinitely many points, because between any 2 points in R, you're going to you can just say the midpoint is there, and 1/3 of the way. And there are various ways of concluding this, but between given any 2 points in R, you can always take the midpoint between them. That also has to be in R. That is C plus D by 2. You can easily see that, and then again between them you can take the midpoint. So you can easily conclude that all these open intervals, half open, half closed, whatever, they have more than 1 point for sure. So they are not singletons. So they are therefore what is that? This cannot be just one. The open sets in AB cannot be a singleton point. So it satisfies all the requirements of the theorem. So therefore closed interval AB is going to be uncountable, and therefore R is going to be uncountable. Okay, so we can go next. So here we have on page 71, I have just proved one of the exercises from page 177 in your textbook. It's an interesting exercise. It's kind of the converse of not in some sense the converse of that result. Remember, we had a result which said we had proved this particular result, that X is ordered set, ordered topology of course, has least upper bound property. Then we can imply, or this implies, so ordered set in ordered topology having least upper bound property implies closed intervals are compact in X are compact. Now here what are we having? Here X is an ordered set in ordered topology in which we are assuming that every closed interval is compact. Then it turns out that it has to have least upper bound property. So one could have said, in an ordered set in ordered topology, least upper bound property is satisfied if and only if every closed interval is compact. You could have actually restated that and said that ordered set in ordered topology has least upper bound property. We have already shown closed intervals are compact. Now closed intervals are compact, then least upper bound property must be satisfied. Okay, so that's why I found that interesting, that it actually shows that this was actually an if and only if condition. So I actually proved it here. I will so I have to now assume closed intervals are compact and show that least upper bound property is satisfied. So maybe somewhere down here we can actually prove it. So suppose your least upper bound property is not satisfied. Then what do we have? The moment least upper bound property is not satisfied, there exists some A in X. A is not empty, non-empty set A. A is bounded above by, I'm just using capital M. Some upper bound is there, and A does not have least upper bound. Okay, so there is some set A and there is a M, and that M is not, there is no least upper bound. What I do is, this is a non-empty set, so I take a Y, let Y belong to A. So I take this Y in A, this point Y, and I take M, and now I make certain observations. One, A cannot have largest element. Why? If A had a largest element, then that would be the least upper bound. In any ordered set, if you take a subset which has largest element, it obviously has a least upper bound, because that largest element obviously becomes an upper bound. Largest element means what? An element some k such that every A in A is less than or equal to k. So it becomes an upper bound which is in the set. Upper bound can always be in the set. So if there was a largest element in A, that would be an upper bound, and obviously it has to be least upper bound, because anything less than that, if you take, then that cannot be upper bound, because A also is this k also is there in A. So anything less than k that you take, then that cannot be upper bound, because k would be the element of A bigger than that. So the moment you have a largest element, obviously that's the least upper bound. So the fact that this A does not have least upper bound tells you A cannot have largest element. So the elements of A can become, if you give me one, I can find a bigger one. If you give me another one, I can find a bigger one than that. I can always keep finding bigger and bigger elements in A. It does not have least upper bound. So if you give me an upper bound, I can find a smaller upper bound. You give me another upper bound, I can find a smaller upper bound. So the upper bounds keep coming down lower and lower. You can keep finding a lower and lower upper bound, and you can find a larger and larger element. Now I can easily construct a open cover for this closed interval. So look at this closed interval from Y to M, because Y is in A, M is an upper bound for the set A. Then this closed interval, I can show that this closed interval is not compact. So if I can show this closed interval is not compact, then I would get a contradiction. Prove that an ordered set in which every closed interval is compact has least upper bound property. If I assume that least upper bound property is not satisfied, I can end up finding an interval which is not compact. In fact, I am going to show this interval is not compact, and that is again very simple. You just look at, in fact I have got it here, so I won't even write. This is not, claim is that is not compact. Look at this particular open cover. So how do you cover Y to M? You take Y and you go right up to any A. For all A in A, you go take Y to A, and you get all these half closed open intervals. These are of course open in the closed interval Y to M. So these are collection of open sets. And another type of set you take is from small m to capital M for all upper bounds which are less than M. So you take, and you can find smaller and smaller upper bounds, less than M. So you will have all these kind of half open closed intervals. This clearly covers the whole of Y to M, because the moment you take a point between Y to M, what are you going to have? You're either going to have points which are in A, or whatever it is. The moment you take a point, if it is not an upper bound, then there is an element of A which is bigger than that, and then what is that? Yeah, from Y to A, that's going to be covered. by an element of this type. And if you take an element n, if it is an upper bound for a, then obviously there is a lesser upper bound, and from m to capital M you are going to have an element. So any point that you take between y and m, either this type of an interval will cover it or this type of an interval will cover it. So this is an open cover. This is an open cover for ym, and this can never have a finite subcover, because the moment you take a finite subcover, the moment you take a finite subcover, you're going to have a largest, you're going to either have this sum of this type and sum of this type. So you're going to have from y, and it's finite, so you can take the largest a naught that you can get among the finitely many, and you can take the smallest m naught from all the m's, because there are finitely many, and you can show that that finite cover only covers from y up to some a naught and from m naught up to some m, and a naught is not the largest element, so you're going to have a naught dash or a naught tilde, which is bigger than a naught and still in a, and that's not going to be in m naught to m, because m naught is an upper bound. So this a naught tilde is clearly neither here nor there, so you can easily conclude that this does not have a finite subcover, because any finite collection that you take, there's going to, among all of these there's going to be a largest one, and all of these there's going to be a largest one, so it will boil down to just the union of two. Then you can find a point in between, because a naught is not the largest element, you can find a point which is between a naught and m naught, and that point is neither here nor there. Okay, so I leave that to you to write the details. I've almost told you everything. Okay, so that was an interesting part. Okay, now let me go next. Okay, so here is the concept of limit point compactness. Let me we are on page 72. Limit point compactness of Bolzano-Weierstrass property. In fact, you must have done Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem in real analysis, so you'll see the similarity. A space X is said to have to be limit point compact if every infinite subset of X has a limit point. So, by the way, okay, we'll come to something later on. So, yeah, this is in metric spaces. In fact, this will be equivalent to compactness, but in general, this is a weaker condition, meaning a space, if it is compact, it will be limit point compact, but if it's limit point compact, it need not be compact. So it's a simple enough property. Every infinite subset of X has to have a limit point, then we would say that the space is limit point compact. Of course, in the Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem, you have seen that closed intervals in R, inside R, your closed interval AB has this property. That's your Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem, right? Any infinite set in interval AB has a limit point. So yeah, you can see why that would be a particular case of this, because closed interval AB is compact, and compactness implies limit point compactness. Once you prove, then you will see that yeah, that if you have proved that closed interval 0 1 is compact, then obviously it has this property that every infinite subset has a limit point. So let's prove, but that's not only in closed interval AB. In general, whenever space is compact, it is automatically limit point compact. That's what we need to prove. So I'll take a fresh page and we will prove it there, that compactness implies limit point compactness. So take a new page, theorem. compact, or rather let me say X is compact implies X is limit point compact. X is compact implies X is limit point compact. Proof is very simple, very similar to what you do in Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem. So in fact exactly the same thing. Oh no, not exactly. Okay, anyways, in fact it might not be similar. I'm a little confusing. Anyways, I shouldn't say that. So let's do it. Let's do it independently. X is compact implies X is limit point compact. Suppose X is compact. Let A be equal to an infinite subset of X. What I will be doing is, in fact I can just pull in a shape. But I can show it to you. This is suppose my X, and you have A inside. You have these points, this infinite set A. That's my, those points are my points of A. Suppose A does not have a limit point, does not have a limit point, then no matter what point you take in X, there is going to be a neighborhood which does not intersect A at a point other than X itself. That's the definition of limit point, right? This point would be a limit point of A if every neighborhood of this point intersects A at a point other than itself. So if A does not have a limit point for all X, this implies for all X belonging to capital X, there exists neighborhood Ux such that let me say, at most it can have one point of A, meaning if I take a point from A itself, if I take this as my X, then yes, you can find a neighborhood which does not contain a point of A other than this point itself. So whatever it is, such that Ux intersection with A can at most have the point X. So what I am saying is this is contained inside singleton X, cannot have anything apart from X. It might even be empty, like in this case it will be empty, or it could have singleton X, it doesn't matter. Now this Ux for all X belong to X is open cover for X. Oh sorry, open cover for X. This implies there exists finite subcover for X. Say you can just take any finitely many of them, say ux1, ux2 up to some uxn. Then that covers, so u1, ux1, ux2, uxn covers the whole of X, but these together, each one of them can have at most one point of A. So A would be contained inside x1, x2, dot 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 xn, because A intersection all of these can at most be x1, x2. There can be only A intersection with one of these can only be the center, that x1. This, it might not even be that, but it can only be up to that. So A is contained in x1, x2, xn. That's a contradiction, because A is supposed to be an infinite set. How can it be contained inside a finite set? So immediately you get a contradiction. So therefore, if we assume that X is compact, it has to be limit point compact, because if you take an infinite set which does not have a limit point, you can show that actually that set ends up becoming a finite set. So yeah, so that is the proof of that. Yeah, that gets completed here. So let me go next. Now we have to show that the converse is not true. As I told you, compactness implies limit point compactness, but limit point compactness does not imply compactness. So here is an artificially constructed example to show that, because we cannot use standard examples from metric spaces, because in metric spaces we will prove shortly that in a metric space both are equivalent, meaning compact is equal to implies limit point compact and limit point compact implies compact. So we can't take R, R2, those kind of examples, but here is an example of a space which is clearly obviously will not be a metric space, and oh, at least the topology is not metrizable. We don't know all those things right now, but how is this artificial example constructed? I'll tell you what you do. So you have this is actually this set. X is the set natural numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so on, that set crossed with AB. So inside this will be points like 5 comma A. That's a point in this set, because it has to be something from natural numbers and something from the set AB. So you'll have 5 comma A as one point. Another point in this set would be 5 comma B would be a point, and then you would have 2 comma B. You will have all these points. So that's how I have drawn a picture for this by, so this is the point 1 comma 1 comma A, this is the point 1 comma B, 2 comma A, 2 comma B, 3 comma A, 3 comma B and so on. So you look at this particular set and what topology do you put on this set? Well, product topology, where natural numbers you put your usual topology of natural numbers, so they are all, it's a discrete topology here. So I could write that it is natural numbers has discrete, and on AB you put indiscrete topology. Indiscrete means there are only two open sets, one is empty and one is the whole space. So in this there are only two open sets, null sets I don't even have to draw. So the other open set is the whole set AB. So when you look at basis elements for this topology on X, what are going to be your basis elements? Basis elements for topology on X. That is going to be a basis element for the topology on N crossed with a basis element for the topology on AB, but AB has indiscrete topology. So the only basis element here is the whole set, and here we have singletons. So you will have singleton cross whole set. So what I have circled here are actually all the basis elements for the topology of X. These are actually your basis elements. These circled ones are actually your basis elements. They have, each basis element is going to have 2 points. 2 comma A, 2 comma B is in one basis element and so on. So I hope you can observe that the basis elements have 2 points. Now first of all, this space, this X cannot be compact, because you just take this as your open cover. Take all the basis elements as your open cover. This goes on and on, infinitely many of them. If you take any finitely many, they cannot cover the whole space. So this open cover will never have a finite subcover. So this space X is not compact. But we can see that this is actually limit point compact. How do we see that this is limit point compact? See how we've done it. Consider any non-empty, let me take a brighter color. Yeah, let me remove some of the stuff that's not required. This is not required. So let me look at any non-empty subset A of X. If I can show this as a, in fact I can show this as a limit point. I don't even require infinite. Anyways, we actually require to take any non-empty, any infinite subset A of X. If I take an infinite subset, I need to show it as a limit point, but because it's non-empty, it has some point n comma A or n comma B. See, it could be you take only these top ones. If you take only the top ones, then it has only natural number with second coordinate B. If you take only down ones, you will have natural numbers with second coordinate A, or you could take a mix of them. Either way, either you will have something of this type n comma A, or you will have one element of the form n comma B. But the moment you have something in A, like if this is in A, the other point becomes a limit point, because every neighborhood then of this other point, when you take the other point, every neighborhood of this other point is going to have a basis element. Any open set or any neighborhood of this point is going to have a basis element, but there is only one basis element which contains this point. So this whole basis element has to be there in that open set that you take. So the moment this point is in A, the other point becomes a limit point, because every neighborhood of the red point must contain the yellow point. There is no option for a neighborhood to contain the red point but not to contain the yellow point, because if a neighborhood contains the red point, it has to have this basis element, and that basis element has the yellow point. So with that you can see that the moment the yellow point is in A, red point becomes limit point. If the yellow point was here, if this was in A, then the other one becomes the limit point of the set. So in any case, in either case, if you take a point in A, the moment A is non-empty, it has a limit point. And so every infinite subset is going to have a limit point. In fact, every non-empty subset of A is going to have a limit point, which is even better. So here is the artificially constructed counter example. S omega is another example given in the book, but I won't get into it. S omega, to understand the set itself, takes some amount of time. The minimal uncountable well ordered set here. So I will not get into S omega. Okay, so let me go next. Okay, so what is we are now, so if we go back, actually, if you look at what we had planned for this lecture, where is that? Yeah, we had planned to do a theorem which implies R is uncountable. We've done this. We had planned to look at limit point compactness, and we've actually looked at this, and we've also seen that compactness implies limit point compactness, but not the other way around. Now we are coming to something called sequential compactness. Maybe Lebesgue-Number lemma holds, we can keep that for the next lecture. So to look at sequential compactness, yeah, let's look at what is the definition first of a sequence, and then we'll define sequential compactness. Of course, you know, but just to keep it self-contained, this lecture, I will go and quickly define a sequence. So Yeah, a sequence of points in a topological space X. So if you take a topological space X, you can define a sequence in it by just defining like what is x1. You define the you define a point x1, x2, x3 and so on. For every natural numbers you define a point xn, and then you will get a function from natural numbers to x, because for every natural number you define a point, and that is what we call a sequence in X. We don't usually write it in as f, but we just say xn is a sequence of points x1, x2, xn. Essentially you have a function from natural numbers to x. A subsequence of a sequence is defined as a sequence yn, and we usually use the notation yi is xni. So y1 is x sum n1, where n1 could be 5, 6, it is a natural number. Y2 is equal to x n2, but we have to ensure that n2 is bigger than n1. So n2 is bigger than n1, n3. So out of the given sequences x1, x2, x3, x4, x5, x6 and so on, you could take y1 to be equal to x2, then y2 may be x5, and y3 x6, and y4 x8 and so on. So when you say y1 is xn1, n1 is 2, y2 is xn2, then n2 is 5, y3 is x6, so your n3 is actually 6 and so on. So I hope you understand this notation yi is xni, what it means. It means ni itself is a natural number, but it is ni is not I, like n2 is not 2, n2 is something bigger, something possibly bigger. Of course you could have the same sequence, in which case ni would be I, like you could take y1 as x1, y2 as x2, y3 as x3, and then yi will be x xni actually would be xi, but that's a rare case. Usually many terms are missing from x when you take the sequence y. So that is what you call a subsequence. So a topological space is said to be sequentially compact if every sequence in X of points in X has a convergent subsequence. So I can give you examples of sequences which have convergent subsequences. Famous example is your xn is what is that, -1 raised to n. You know the sequence in R, that's the sequence first term x1 is -1, then x2 is 1, then x3 is -1, and x4 is 1 again, and x5 is -1 and so on. It's +1, -1 alternating sequence. Does this have a convergent subsequence? Yes. In fact, I can find many. One of them would be take y1 to be x2, take this as your y1, take y2 to be equal to x4 and so on. So essentially you define yi to be equal to x 2i, right? Then this sequence is actually a subsequence, yi becomes a subsequence, and it is convergent. In fact, it's the constant sequence 1, so it converges to 1. In fact, yeah, so that should explain to you what is meant by sequence, subsequence and convergent subsequence. That's just a recalling actually. Okay, so we will stop this lecture here, and although we had one more point to prove that the Lebesgue number lemma holds, that in a sequentially compact space, we'll show that in the next lecture. So we'll stop here.